Good morning. I'm Ben Thompson. I'm a physician, the co-founder of Eyewitness Gaza, board member of the Muslim Advisory Council of Canada, and I've been volunteering in Gaza since 2013, including during Israel's genocide on Gaza. Thank you for joining us in Parliament Hill today. Today, members of Parliament, doctors, lawyers, faith leaders, and community advocates stand shoulder to shoulder because language matters. G7 leaders recently spoke of security and stability, but refused to acknowledge Gaza, let alone say what's happening there, a genocide. And today is the 622nd day of Israel's genocide in Gaza. No more euphemisms, no more caveats. The Canadian government must name it. Under the Genocide Convention of 1948, recognizing genocide mandates Canada to investigate, prosecute, and prevent further atrocities. Anything less is support for mass murder. As a humanitarian, I learned of the importance that warring parties uphold international humanitarian law and that humanitarian aid be delivered with neutrality, independence, impartiality, and humanity. And yet, humanitarians worldwide are appalled at Israel's frank disregard for humanitarian law. Israel has dismissed an entire system of humanitarian law and humanitarian aid that has saved millions since the Red Cross was created. Over the next 30 minutes, you will hear firsthand testimony from Gaza, legal analysis of Canada's binding duties, and you'll hear voices from Canada explaining why Muslim, Jewish, and secular Canadians alike demand the Canadian government call it what it is and act. We are here to deliver a clear and unambiguous message. Name it, stop it, sanction it. Israel's genocide in Gaza must stop. The Canadian government must call it genocide, comply with international law, and demand rapid and unhindered humanitarian access. It's genocide. Name it, stop it, sanction it. It is my honor now first to introduce Dr. Tarek Loubani. He is a Palestinian-Canadian emergency room physician volunteering in Gaza's hospitals since 2012. He is currently volunteering at Nasser Hospital in Han Yunis, Gaza. And unfortunately, he is not available live, so we will play a recorded video.
I'm in Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, Palestine. This is a place that has been facing relentless, murderous genocide over the past 2 years. One of the first things that we must do is diagnose the problem. This is genocide. We must name it. And the next thing we must do is make it impossible to continue. We have to force our governments to act. We have to force the Israelis to stop. They will not stop on their own. They seemingly cannot stop on their own. There have been tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people killed so far. The numbers are almost impossible to know because so many lay beneath the rubble. But each of those individuals that make up that number is a universe into themselves. A person who had hopes and dreams. A person who had a life, a background, who is loved and was loved. Each of those people is like you and like me. There was one case that has been really sticking in my mind recently of a man who came into the hospital with a boy. They had been walking just down the street doing nothing in particular when a quadcopter, an Israeli quadcopter, flew overhead and dropped an anti-personnel grenade on them. The grenade exploded. They were injured, and that's what brought them to our emergency department. As we frantically struggled to treat this man to save his life, he asked about his son, a little boy of 4 or 5. I looked over his son, his body lifeless, unmoving, staring into the abyss, and I had to tell this man that his son was dead. I never ask about the family, about the mother, about the parents. I never ask because if I have to ask, they're probably dead too. And this man, he started crying, wailing with the incredible pain of a parent who's lost his child. And he said to his son, "Why did you leave me? Why did you abandon me?" And then, to answer his own question, he said, "Was it to be with your mother and your sisters?" It turned out that they had been killed a few months earlier in a tent while they were all sleeping. The only two survivors, this man and his son, from their family, that large extended family. And so there he was, a man 2 years ago, happy with life, and now, because of the Israelis, mourning the loss of everything and everybody who he cared about. My friends, we have to name this as genocide. And only when we name it can we start acting upon it and making sure that everything is done to hold those people who are responsible accountable and to stop this immediately. Our governments must hear our voices loud and clear. We must force them to act so that they can force Israel to stop.
Thank you. I'd like now to introduce Mr. Alex Nev, a professor of international humanitarian law, who recently led a group of over 500 legal scholars across Canada who agree that Israel's actions in Gaza constitute genocide.
Thank you, Ben, and just let me begin. I believe Tarek may be able to hear us, and I just want to say there simply are no words to express the gratitude and respect that we all feel for the incredible work that you and healthcare workers are doing in Gaza. 10 days ago, in the lead up to the G7 summit, I joined over 400 law professors, lawyers, academics, former ambassadors, leaders of civil society organizations and faith groups, and the heads of 3 of the country's principal labor unions in an open letter to Prime Minister Carney calling on him to end genocide in Gaza. Our demand was clear. Watching from the sidelines as incontrovertible evidence of genocide continues to mount is unacceptable. Refusing to call out the destructive nightmare in Gaza for what it is, genocide, does not somehow make it anything but that, genocide. And it does not in any way absolve us from both moral and legal blame and guilt for letting genocide happen right in front of us. We laid out concrete recommendations in 5 areas. First, an immediate permanent ceasefire and the release of all Israeli and Palestinian captives. 2, full humanitarian access to Gaza. 3, compliance with the International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court. 4, a range of domestic measures, such as withdrawing from our free trade agreement with Israel, further sanctions on Israeli leaders, investigations on charges under the Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes Act, a comprehensive 2-way arms embargo, and stripping charitable status from organizations complicit in crimes under international law. And finally, we called on Canada to immediately recognize the State of Palestine. We urged the Prime Minister to demonstrate leadership at the G7 meetings to galvanize a stronger international response, noting that Canada and all G7 members have a binding obligation under the UN Genocide Convention to act. We have had no reply to our letter, and the situation in Gaza was not taken up by the G7. It is a moral disgrace and legal abdication to witness that silence, that failure to act, and that inexcusable refusal to meet our international responsibilities. Prime Minister Carney, Foreign Affairs Minister Anand, and the entirety of the Canadian government must spare no effort to bring the genocide in Gaza to an immediate end. As a matter of conscience and as a matter of legal obligation, there simply is no other choice. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like now to introduce Mr. Ahmed Al-Qadi, the Government Affairs and Public Policy Officer for the National Council of Canadian Muslims.
Good morning. Thank you, Ben. Just over a month ago, Palestinian Canadians like myself and fellow Canadians across our nation marked 77 years since the Nakba, or catastrophe of 1948, when over 700,000 Palestinians were violently expelled from their homes in Palestine. And as we stand here now, decades later, the Palestinians of Gaza are enduring what can only be seen as another Nakba. I remember a time months ago where I would sit down with various parliamentarians who stood on the fence of this crisis, and I would demonstrate to them very clearly that the Israeli government is not interested in peace. Rather, they are interested in ethnically cleansing all of Gaza, and they are actively committing genocidal acts. And I'll be very clear that you don't have to take my word for it, or any number of international experts who have echoed this very concern. Just listen to what the ministers in the Netanyahu government say all the time. Now it's common knowledge because Benjamin Netanyahu and US President Trump openly speak about plans to violently expel 2 million Palestinians from Gaza ahead of annexing it. And they're doing exactly what they promised to do. And here we are 20 months and counting, and we're urging the Canadian government to unilaterally uphold international law. We as a sovereign nation have a duty to uphold international law. And it's within this context, 20 months later, that our country stands in a uniquely positioned place. Over the past few months, we Canadians learned what it feels like to be facing threats from an aggressive neighbor that attacks our sovereignty with threats of annexation. We've seen attempts from the Trump administration to employ pressure tactics to try and dominate us. And this is the same administration that has joined the Netanyahu government in butchering Palestinians with the openly stated goal of taking control of the region. And whether we want to accept this today or tomorrow or never, the truth is this does not bode well for us as Canadians. It does not bode well for us to live in a world where some countries can flout international law and adopt a policy of might means right. We of all people should be able to empathize with the threats that are facing the people in Gaza. So while we welcome announcements from the Government of Canada to join our European allies in sanctioning Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, it is paramount that Canada charts its own course in defense of international law. And we further our work to sanction Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet under the Magnitsky sanctions regime and hold them accountable for their mass war crimes. It's time that Canada takes the lead and recognize that what's taking place in Gaza threatens the entire international rules-based order that we helped establish. It threatens Canada. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like now to introduce Dr. Dorotea Gucciardo. She is the Director of Development at GLIA Equal Care, where she's organized dozens of missions for healthcare workers to provide life-saving care in Gaza during the genocide. She is also the co-founder of Eyewitness Gaza.
Our staff are witnessing atrocities in real time. Speaking out is part of our duty of care, and what we see is genocide. For our Palestinian colleagues, this is not abstract. They've lost loved ones, survived bombings, and endured ongoing trauma from drone fire and displacement. They aren't just witnesses to genocide, they're survivors, continuing to provide care at immense personal risk. That care is delivered under an illegal blockade. Israel has total control over what and who enters Gaza. Even when aid is technically permitted, it's functionally blocked. There is no fuel to move it, no trucks to deliver it, and no guarantees of safety for those distributing it. These aren't bureaucratic glitches. They're deliberate acts designed to collapse the humanitarian system, punish the population, and render care impossible. Now that collapse is being formalized through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, a U.S. Israeli-run apparatus that operates outside of international humanitarian standards. Aid is distributed at gunpoint by American mercenaries. It's inhumane, degrading, dangerous, and it violates every principle of humanitarian law. To help Canadians understand this, imagine if Toronto was starving. The UN system would deploy over 1,300 distribution sites. The GHF model? 10. In Montreal, the UN would open 850 sites. GHF's version? 6. In Vancouver, where nearly 600 sites would be needed, the GHF equivalent would offer just 4. And in Gaza, the UN had a well-maintained system of 400 aid sites. GHF has replaced those with only 3. Worse, 20 to 50 Palestinians are being killed daily just for trying to secure a food package. Every body my medical team treats is skin and bones. This is engineered starvation enforced at gunpoint. The blockade itself is illegal. The targeting of civilians seeking aid is a war crime. And yet, Canada remains silent. We can't claim to stand for human rights while enabling a model that kills starving civilians and replaces aid workers with armed contractors. If we would never accept this in Toronto, Montreal, or Vancouver, we cannot accept it in Gaza. We demand that Canada publicly reject the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation model, call for the full restoration of the UN humanitarian system, enforce international law against the blockade and starvation, and name what is happening in Gaza for what it is, a genocide.
Thank you. I'd like now to introduce Mr. Sam Hirsch, representing Independent Jewish Voices.
Thanks, Ben. So, hello, bonjour. Je m'appelle Sam Hirsch. Je suis ici aujourd'hui de la part de Voix indépendantes juives Canada, une collective avec plus de 1000 membres à travers notre pays, avec le but de pousser pour un juste paix dans la Palestine-Israël. Dans notre diversité, nous nous rassemblons en tant que juifs et juives dans la poursuite d'un avenir juste, pacifique et digne pour le peuple palestinien et israélien et contre toutes les formes de racisme, y compris l'antisémitisme et le racisme anti-palestinien. Independent Jewish Voices, or IJV, believes that no one should have to choose between embracing Judaism or Jewishness and supporting Palestinian human rights. This is my 4th time in the past 20 months being here in this press gallery room as a representative of IJV, calling on this government to take action on what most human rights experts, scholars, civil society, and more than half of all Canadians agree is a genocide. It shouldn't be this hard or take this long to take action, and it certainly shouldn't be controversial to call what is happening in Gaza a genocide. Yet here we are, almost 2 years later, and many organizations that claim to represent the Jewish community, like CIJA and others, continue to weaponize the very real threat of anti-Semitism in order to silence critics. Just recently, an Ottawa High School student and valedictorian was reprimanded for bringing attention to the genocide in her commencement speech. And many more still endure repercussions simply for showing solidarity with Palestinians, while other organizations who regularly practice or spew anti-Palestinian racism continue to act with absolute impunity. The Canadian government has made this even worse with its recent adoption of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, a definition that perverts the important fight against anti-Semitism and has served mostly to chill activism around Palestinian human rights. To be clear, there is nothing wrong or anti-Semitic about criticizing Israel's human rights record or supporting the Palestinian right to self-determination. The safety of Jews cannot and does not come at the expense of Palestinians. En persistant à ne rien faire, le gouvernement du Canada accroît chaque jour sa complicité. Si notre gouvernement est véritablement engagé en faveur de la paix pour tout au Moyen-Orient, il doit agir davantage que de simplement sanctionner 2 ministres, alors que la responsabilité incombe à l'ensemble du cabinet israélien. So today I stand here with this very large, wide, and broad coalition of legal experts, community leaders, and advocates to call on this government to 1, call what is going on in Gaza what it actually is, a genocide. 2, take real action by complying with the international courts and putting in place broader sanctions that will actually put pressure on the Israeli state. And 3, force unhindered access to humanitarian aid to stop the starvation of Gaza's population, including the tens of thousands of children suffering. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I'd like now to introduce Ms. Tabassum Wine. She is the Executive Director of the Muslim Advisory Council of Canada.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you everyone for being here. If this were happening anywhere else in the world, Canada would have already called it a genocide. But because it's Israel, our leaders remain silent. And because the victims are Palestinian, the world continues to look away. But let's be clear, silence is not diplomacy. It's complicity. Politicians have stood with our community time and time again when it was politically convenient and counted on our votes. But when push came to shove, they were nowhere to be found, and silence followed. That's not leadership, that's evasion, and it has consequences. We are no longer going to accept empty words. Our demands are clear. Name the genocide, stop arming Israel, and sanction Israel. Because global events have localized impact. Just a few months ago, a woman in Ajax, her hijab was almost set on fire. In Ottawa, a Zionist pulled off the hijab of a Muslim woman, and the justice system dropped the charges against the perpetrator, and this led to deep trauma of our community member. In various sectors, our community is being silenced for speaking up for human rights. And in the education sector, girls who wear the hijab, they're being asked by their classmates, do you have a bomb under your hijab? And these are just a handful of incidences reported to us. And while these incidences are horrific, they are nothing compared to what our Palestinian brothers and sisters are going through and suffering through. But they do make one thing clear. When our leaders refuse to name this a genocide, it enables the rise of Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian racism right here in Canada. And we must also ask, what message is Canada sending when Canadian-Israeli dual citizens are allowed to travel to Israel, fight in a foreign army accused of genocide, and return home with no accountability? According to a Toronto Star investigation published on June 2nd, the RCMP has launched an intelligence-led process to collect and assess information under the Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes Act. But to be clear, no related criminal investigations have been initiated. So we're calling upon the RCMP to be transparent in its ongoing investigation and to move forward and towards criminally charging those individuals complicit in war crimes. The Canadian Muslim community is devastated, but we are not defeated. To every elected official, this is your test. If you claim to stand for human rights, prove it. Otherwise, your human rights rhetoric is a farce and we see right through it. Call it a genocide, stop arming Israel, sanction Israel. Anything less is complicity. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, before we get to questions, I'm honored to introduce the Honorable Mr. Alexandre Bouleris.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. It's a great honor to be here this morning on this really crucial and devastating issue. I'm honored to speak in the behalf of the NDP caucus, and I want to thank all my colleagues that are doing a lot of work on what is going on in Gaza, and what's going on is a genocide, and the Canadian government should have the honesty and the courage to name it. Depuis 20 mois, au moins 55 000 Palestiniens et Palestiniennes se sont fait tuer dans ce génocide. Au moins 130 000 personnes ont été blessées, des gens qui ont été amputés, les infrastructures ont été bombardées, des écoles, des hôpitaux également, des gens déplacés par milliers. On assiste à une tentative avérée de nettoyage ethnique dans la bande de Gaza. Et malheureusement, le gouvernement canadien, le gouvernement libéral, n'en fait pas assez. On a tous vu des images de ces réfugiés dans leurs tentes se faire bombarder. On a tous constaté qu'il y a au moins 15 000 enfants qui se sont fait tuer. Des enfants qu'on a vus sur des vidéos en train de mourir, brûlés vifs. Comment ne pas entendre leurs cris? Comment ne pas entendre leurs pleurs? Comment ne pas ressentir leur souffrance et le désespoir de tout un peuple qui est en train de mourir sous nos yeux? Et on ne pourra jamais dire qu'on ne le savait pas. Alors l'inaction, c'est de la complicité. Regarder ailleurs, c'est perdre notre propre humanité. Il faut agir, parce que c'est un génocide sous nos yeux tous les jours. Hier, 76 Palestiniens sont fait tuer en essayant d'aller chercher de la nourriture. La journée avant, c'était 50. La journée avant, c'était 30 Palestiniens qui se sont fait tuer. Et la journée avant, c'était d'autres dizaines de personnes qui se sont fait bombarder et tuer. Et la journée d'avant, vous comprenez, c'est systématique. Il ne faut pas que le regard du monde se détourne de ces crimes qui sont en train de se produire en ce moment. Et il faut agir. Il faut dire que c'est un génocide. Il faut faire respecter le droit international. Il faut appliquer les décisions de la Cour internationale de justice et de la Cour pénale internationale. Il faut sanctionner Israël et pas juste 2 ministres d'extrême droite. Il faut arrêter de vendre des armes au régime Netanyahou. Il faut permettre l'accès de l'aide humanitaire sur place. Il faut également reconnaître l'État palestinien. Il y a quelques semaines, le premier ministre Carney, avec la France et le Royaume-Uni, ont fait une déclaration commune disant « Si ça continue, il va y avoir des conséquences. » Alors, ça vous prend quoi, M. Carney? Parce que ça continue. Quand est-ce que vous allez agir réellement? C'est ça qu'on attend. On n'en peut plus. On ne veut plus voir ces Palestiniens se faire tuer sous nos yeux. Alors, c'est le temps d'agir. Il faut que le Canada prenne ses responsabilités et sanctionne Israël, arrête de vendre des armes et reconnaisse l'État palestinien. Merci.
Thank you so much. Now, Dr. Lubani is, I should mention, I understand he's now on Zoom. I would welcome any questions from the press gallery.
I guess I'm the press gallery today here. Yeah, this is really, it's kind of a two-part question. It's about Canadian arms sales to Israel. I kind of like you to tease out your understanding of what we're doing now. And the second part is about Canadian investment, particularly Canadian bank investment in Israeli weapons manufacturers. And do you see that as part of that same problem? So I don't know who, with Alex or something.
Sure, I can start. With respect to arms sales, I think the overwhelming concern that is not unique to Israel, but certainly is very much in the spotlight now, is that Canadian arms control regulations exempt the United States. And we have a consistent pattern, and we very much have seen it, particularly with parts and components for arms systems being manufactured in Canada, sold, transferred to the United States, and then onward to Israel. It's often referred to as the U.S. loophole. Civil society groups have been calling for that loophole to be closed for years. Certainly what is happening now with respect to the situation in Israel, whereby Canadian arms manufacturers therefore do continue to contribute to the arming of the Israeli military, makes it clear as to why that's so important. I certainly don't, I myself don't have the facts and figures about the role of banks, but it is, I think, quite a well-known and very serious concern. And I think what it reminds us is complicity in genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, has many different facets to it. And we absolutely need to look very closely at financial complicity, because that very often is what, more than anything, enables acts of genocide, makes it possible for war crimes to be committed, furthers crimes against humanity, and we should absolutely be looking at curtailing all of that.
Thank you. Were there any questions online or from the press gallery?
We don't have any more questions at the moment.
Thank you so much.